Hi everybody, this is I think going to be our last video for the quarter. We're winding down. I can't believe it. In so many ways it's gone by so fast, but then in other ways it's been a challenging quarter and I appreciate everybody's concerned, those of you who've emailed or messaged me about my mother, and she's still in rehab, didn't get to have Thanksgiving with us, and probably isn't going to be able to have Christmas with us either. So that's kind of depressing for her, and I think for everybody else. Anyway, I've got to talk fast because I only have 15 minutes, and I got a lot to say about this. I love talking about schizophrenia. It's one of the things, the diagnoses that is most fascinating to me, and I have had the opportunity to work with some people who've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and one of them actually came when I was in my practicum, like fresh, new, like one of my first clients that I ever had when I was working in the clinic at the university where I was got my degree. And I don't know why they chose to make him this client, but he had been a client there for a while at the university clinic, and the person who'd been working with him graduated, and so then they handed him to me, and I knew I had no idea what to do with this person. But the deal is that there really wasn't a whole lot I could do with him. He was on medication for schizophrenia, and he was schizophrenia with the paranoid type. But also, as I was listening to the video or watching the video, the guy was talking about disorganized and undifferentiated, which really could have been that some too, because he definitely had some of the disorganized speech, like the guy Peter on the video, and but mostly I think it was paranoid schizophrenia. He had delusions, and it was a fascinating case, and I actually really love working with people with schizophrenia, and I've often thought that I might even actually like to specialize. Although, like I said, that with this client Robert, I'll say his name, first name Robert, um, there really wasn't a whole lot because no, well, number one, he was borderline mentally retarded. He had about an 80 point IQ, which I'm not sure. I don't always necessarily think that IQ tests are really accurate, but he came up as about scoring an 80, which put him in the borderline mentally retarded. Although I have to tell you, this guy was like, it was almost like idiot savant. He was so bright about some things. He could talk on and on about politics. It was as if he listened to NPR or something all day long, because he talked politics left and right. He actually knew more about some things than I did about politics. But we had some of the most fascinating conversations, and I just would sit and listen to him and actually take voracious notes. I don't know what I ever thought I was going to do with them, because I really couldn't do anything with them because they were private, but it was just amazing some of the things that he would say sometimes and come up with, the things that would just come out of his mouth. But he used to sit, um, well, go back to what I was going to say is there really wasn't a whole lot. What we were working on really, and he was there for anger management, he had some anger issues. And so we were really trying to, get some tools for him to manage his anger. And that's what the person before me had been working on him, with him on, like trying to help him meditate and do walks and things that could help him kind of rechannel or channel some of his anger in other directions. And he had good reason to be angry, and I'll talk about that too. But anyway, he would. So that's what we were. The best thing we could really hope for was for him to just not hurt somebody. He couldn't work. Unlike Valerie, that one of the videos here, Valerie's pretty high functioning, My client, Robert, was very much more like Peter, a lot like Peter, as a matter of fact. Some of the things that Robert would say are very similar to the things that Peter said. Um, Although Peter, I think, maybe is a little bit, has a little bit maybe higher IQ. But Robert, he sat and he would do like this with his nose. I mean, just a lot, like incessantly, habitually, kind of almost like a tick. But one day he said, "Well, you might wonder why I do this all the time." He said, "I do that because when the aliens abducted me, they stuck rods up my nose, and now my nose is like really sensitive." And anyway, that obviously was a delusion. But he really did believe that he'd been abducted, and he referred to that many, many times. So it wasn't just a random thing. He really had this idea in his mind that had happened. Um, Another thing that I don't think they really say necessarily on the DSM criteria, but one of the things that I've heard or read that schizophrenics, I use that word schizophrenic, I guess, um, people with schizophrenia, but they talk in metaphors, and he would come up with these most amazing metaphors about flying through the sky and this, butterfly this, and referring to himself, I'm like a butterfly, you know, who's flying from one mountain to another. Just almost kind of genius kind of stuff that came out of his mind, his mouth, but it was kind of, and then also disorganized, which I think my my videos kind of that way too, because I've got so much to say and I'm bouncing from one thing to the next. But anyway, what I knew about Robert was that when he was young, he came from a very abusive home environment, and when they did try to mainstream him into the public schools when he was younger, and I know that, and he talked about this, but he kind of talked about it in a kind of almost a delusional way. But I do know, based on what his case records said, case notes, that he had been molested, basically sexually molested by some guys. He was in, I think it was maybe junior high or high school, and he was in the football locker room. I guess maybe he was like the water boy or something for the team, and he was in the locker room, and apparently some football players had molested him um, with I have a hard time even saying it, with a broom handle. And so I think I kind of got that the rods ramming up his nose, or that's just kind of how he manifested in his mind, or the story he told himself about being abducted by aliens, that was kind of maybe the trauma that kind of set this whole thing off. Now, I'm not saying he didn't always have a mental illness, but the guy in the video talked about how some people, it can be genetic, where somebody might have a propensity toward having this schizophrenia, but that not everybody who has that propensity has schizophrenia. But then there might be a trauma or something that then kind of puts them, over the edge into that. And so I'm thinking that there were, with Robert and, a lot of other people, I'm sure, that something happened, traumatic, happened to them early in life, and then that pushed them over, um, as far as like their chemically, the chemical reaction in their brain, was set off by the trauma. And I honestly think that's true about a lot of mental illnesses. I think that some people may have a propensity, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to have any of these things, bipolar or anything, um, even maybe ADD, who knows, that there's something that happens that, kind of triggers chemically. When people say, well, it's chemical imbalance, well, maybe it is. It probably is. But, there's something that triggers that, that everybody who has that propensity isn't necessarily going to manifest it. So it's just when all things line up. So anyway, so for paranoid or for schizophrenics in general, really basically, as the guy said, the only thing that we can do really is medicate. That's the first line of treatment is medication, and it's something, we talked earlier in one of our discussions about whether people ever recover, and they really don't from schizophrenia. It is a lifelong illness that's really just managed with medication pretty much, and like he said, back in the 50s, before they had the medication they do now, and earlier, people lived in mental institutions. And Valerie is very high functioning. That is, I think, maybe the exception rather than the rule. I don't know that for sure, but I haven't seen very many people with schizophrenia who really actually function as well as she does. And that's just me. That's not saying that there aren't a ton of people out there. And maybe the people who came to me aren't the ones necessarily who've gotten the help that she got. Um, but I don't know if some of y'all, I'm sure, have seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But what a great movie. If you haven't seen it, see it, because then it shows you a lot about the way they used to do. Also, Girl Interrupted, that's another good one, I think. More updated version, but still back in the day when they used to do frontal lobotomies or electric shock treatment. They do shock treatment nowadays, but it's a lot more, it's safer and a lot less, uh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Um, Abusive, maybe, because it used to be pretty violent, I think. But I actually have a friend who gets treatments from. I actually have a couple of friends who get treatments from time to time, and it's not nearly as horrible as it used to be. But those are great movies to watch for things like that and the way that they used to treat these illnesses. But it's something that somebody really has for life, and the best thing we can do is to manage with medication and some, like they said, some cognitive therapy and some life skills and things that help them manage their symptoms so that they can function fairly well in society and not be harmful to themselves or others. This guy Robert, he it was kind of scary, but he used to talk about he hated George W. Bush, and he said one day he said, this wasn't when he was president, but he said, I think, that he really just wanted to take him out in the country and hang him up and slit his throat. I knew he had no way of doing that, but that's just how angry this guy was. But also how kind of, with it in some ways he was, even to know, to have the sense that he, about a politician like that. One day I walked in to my treatment room, and he was already in there. He was lying down on the couch and had his hands under his head, just kind of leaning back. And I said, "Hey, Robert, what you doing?" And he said, "Oh, um, Freud, how the couch, And so I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I get it." He was acting like he was sitting on a couch, and Freud was walking into the room for psychoanalytic, I guess. So, but I mean, he knew about Freud, and he knew what it looked like to be in an office with Freud. You know, it was just kind of some of the things he said and did just blew me away. And um, anyway, so and that's, I guess, one of the reasons why working with people with schizophrenia is so fascinating, because you really never know what to expect. Um, and I guess in retrospect, possibly fortunately we were on video all the time, but I guess something could have happened where he could have gone off and tried to hurt me or something. But I never really felt unsafe with him. We had a really great relationship, and it only ended when I ended my practicum experience there at the university. I'm running out of time, but I just, there's more. I could say so much more. It's so interesting, so fascinating. I hope that y'all have a great holiday season, and it's been great having y'all in this class this quarter. And maybe I'll see you some of the time.